meeting last week on Wednesday. And this is when we opened the door for discussion for all the current students and faculty. And we discussed topics related to social issues. And for our very first meeting, we did a discussion on the critical race theory. And it was an hour-long discussion because it's a hot button topic of the education system right now. And it's a very safe space and open space for graduates and help with it. So it was really successful, and we hope to have a lot of us.
Right, so on top of it being this week, it's also Winter Concert Week. So tomorrow starts at 7 p.m. We will be seeing the instrumental concerts. So that's concert band, wind ensemble, jazz ensemble. And then Wednesday, December 8th, also at 7 p.m. are the vocal concerts. So that's concert chorus, vocal ensemble, and acapella. I know I will be participating in a concert tomorrow for the wind ensemble. Very excited to do that. And the other item I'd like to mention is about the class Impact and Activism. So this was introduced back in the fall. The English department introduced it. And this term, students got to work with Alan Lazzaros and Kevin Palmieri from Next Level University podcast. They just talk about their craft. And what's exciting is that in the future, we can expect kind of a collaboration, a collaborative podcast called Perspectives with a Purpose. And it's basically where the students discuss matters regarding diversity and social justice. Yeah, we're very excited to listen to that. Cool.
Great. Thank you both for sharing. Any questions or comments further from members of the school committee?
What is there, young?
Yeah,
Right. Which breed? Which breed of dog?
Huh?
What breed of dog?
I'm not really sure, but once they come in, I can let you know.
I heard it might be an Australian Shepherd mix.
Oh, fun. And the impact and activism class that you're talking about, that's a new English curriculum class?
It's an elective class. It's sophomores.
Yeah. And I know they were working on podcasts this year, so we're not going to be able to hear the ones that are created by this year's class, or is that
I think they're introducing it later
later? Okay.
in the year.
Okay, cool.
So we'll see.
Okay. Next agenda item then would be administrator comments. So we'll hear from our interim superintendent.
All right, thank you. So we have a few updates and some recognitions tonight. First, I just want to give an update on the interim superintendent goals. I shared the document with you. That's a draft document, but we weren't able to have the full subcommittee to really go through the draft goals. So what I decided to do is just share it with the whole committee now. We'll reschedule that subcommittee meeting so we can go through the goals and see if there's anything we want to change. And then I'll come forward to the whole committee at either the first meeting in January probably, or the second one if we have to, and just share the whole goals, and then you would approve or give any feedback on that at that point. So I just wanted to give that to you in advance. What's more exciting, we have lots of district news and recognition that I wanted to share. So about a week ago, or a couple of weeks ago, we were recognized by EverFi, which is a company that we've been using, a vendor. It's free through the state, probably about 5 years now, and we've started it in some middle school classes and some high school classes. And we are considered to be an empowered district, and we received a seal from them recognizing our commitment to whole child education through the use of their platform. And the seal's issued to only 6% of the EverFi districts. Some of the criteria they look for is the use of 11 evidence-informed programs to teach critical life skills in areas such as financial education, STEM and career readiness, social emotional learning, health and wellness. And we have expanded it, even though it started just in a few classes at the middle school. We've been using it now at the middle school and the high school. And the programming, according to EverFi, has now positively impacted over 532 students that we have at the middle and high school. I want to thank Britt Kaler, Beth Gervais, Sarah Higgins, Julie Ahmed Jusson, and I even saw today a tweet about Ryan far was using in class today, so I might be missing some other teachers where it's been expanding. But it's really a great program. There's state funding that came out. We initially jumped on board with them because of some of the financial literacy courses that they had, but over the years, they've been bringing in additional programming funded by businesses in Massachusetts. So moving past that recognition, I also have some members of our school community I'd like to formally recognize here tonight. First, we have our Nipmuc English teacher, Courtney Henry, and she has been recognized by the Mass Insight Education as a recipient of the 2022 Partners in Excellent Teacher Award for her exemplary work in the AP Language and Composition course. The Partners in Excellent Awards annually recognizes the best AP teachers in the Mass Institute's AP STEM and English program. The teachers who receive this award have demonstrated extraordinary success in helping their students achieve qualifying scores on the AP exam through fully participating in their program of PD and student support. During these challenging times for our students and teachers, Mass Insight is proud to be able to recognize teachers like Courtney who are making a difference in their classrooms and communities day in, day out. The second person I'd like to recognize, and we'll call both of them up, is our Nipmuc Athletic Director, Chris Schmidt. He received the Professional Development Award from the Massachusetts Secondary School Athletic Directors Association. The Massachusetts Secondary School Athletics Directors Association, the MSSAADA, PD Award was established to honor an individual who possesses commitment and dedication to the vision of professional development at both the state and local levels. This is the second time they have recognized Chris for his work. In 2018, he received the Ted Damko Award for exemplifying the highest standards of the profession and making significant contributions to his school and community. So I'd like to invite both Chris and Courtney up to the front, and we have some certificates of recognition from the school committee, and we'd love to take a picture to recognize it formally here, if you don't mind. Okay, come on up. Maybe we can do it. Maybe we'll do it separate. Or
Am I waiting to do this for pictures? Do we have to formally
recognize? This is
okay.
Good. You ready?
Okay.
Formally recognize, and then we'll do a picture.
Okay. How about we do practice my hand and shake? Do we shake these days?
Okay. Thank you.
Really works, really works.
Yeah.
It's really great.
And Chris,
Do the full picture.
we're gonna do a full picture in a second.
Don't go super.
You can see that their eyes, though.
All right, can we have a picture with both of you, with the
Everybody.
whole committee and the students? That's all right? It's good, this is exciting. We have to do more of this.
You want to get in, I'll take the
All right, everyone look this way. Oh. Can I see everyone's face? Keep looking. Nice.
All right.
I like that. Thank you for that. And next up, I'd like to have Dr. Cheryl Kirkpatrick, our interim assistant superintendent of schools, come up. She's going to share an update regarding district PD planning, including the launch of a district-wide focus study on culturally responsive teaching.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to share with you some of what we're doing to plan for professional development for the district, and a little bit of a number of structures that we use to kind of identify professional learning. Back from their peers, and also gathering information they have from their departments and teams. They come together and they make suggestions for how we can best address the needs in each building, in each department and grade level. And so together, that committee has put together a great plan for our next half-day professional development day, which is this coming Friday. And involved in that is going to be a situation where 3 buildings will host professional development at about the same times based on the dismissal times. And this group will focus on the strands that we've been championing for the year, which include understanding, supporting, and engaging our students. And embedded in that, they will also, through their experiences, focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is a great strategic initiative for the district this year. So there'll be programming of all sorts that folks can take advantage of. Some of it will be curriculum-based at the elementary school. Some of it will be focused on data and some of the platforms that we're using for middle school. And the high school has a whole palette of different options that folks will be able to take advantage of. I view that in connection with a whole host of other things that the district will put together as a way of differentiating learning for our adults here. And that includes also role-based professional development that we might not be able to provide to groups that are in roles where there's just 1 or 2 folks there. And so what we do is we collaborate with a whole network of school districts in the area to be able to identify these types of opportunities for those groups of educators. And additionally, we also are doing some come if you want to opportunities, right, in the form of a book study, which you all are invited to join. And we've kind of put it out there as, you know, don't get hung up on having to meet deadlines. We really just want you to read the book and come and talk to us and have conversations. So there's a forum that we use that's Google Classrooms, and folks will be able to have discussions online that way. And they'll also be able to have some in-person discussions that we will structure through the course of that to kind of look at the text, examine it together, and think about next steps as a district. So that's a quick update for me. I was told that we need to keep it brief, and I'll just end and say I view professional learning and professional development as an investment because our time is precious, and it's really important, I think, that we use that time wisely, and I feel really good about the way that this district kind of informs what needs to be done in these areas. Good questions?
Can't wait for the invite.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So next up, we're going to have 2 beginning budget presentations. We had mentioned before that in the next few meetings, we'll start to have various departments and buildings come forward with brief budget presentations. And so Chris is back there somewhere again. We're going to ask you to come on up and begin with the athletic budget presentation. We're going to display it. Sam will be able to put it up there and online, but you also have a link to it in your background notes for the meeting here too. Come on up. Thank you.
Everyone okay? I don't like to sit. So if you look at my office, I pretty much stand now all day. So if everyone's okay with me standing, I'll stay there. Yeah, that's the problem. When I used to teach, I was all over. I come in sort of give, I guess, somewhat of a state of the athletic department presentation to you. So a little bit about where we've been over the last couple of years, but also where I think it's a short and long-term planning down the line, because I think it's something that we need to do, especially I think the way high school athletics is going. I think it's going to be important for us as a district, as a school, as a community to look at that long-range forecasting and what are the things that we need to plan to do. So engage as many students as we can. Typically in most of our sports, we have both varsity and sub-varsity teams, and we look to cast as broad a net as our student population. Athletes to represent our community with class is not necessarily about wins and losses. Wins and losses are a byproduct of what we do. But what we're trying to do is teach our student athletes how to be functioning adults, I guess you could say, and having them leave here with the tools that they need to be successful, both secondary, but eventually in the real world. People don't think of athletics as the classroom. It is a classroom. It's just a classroom in a different setting. So one of the things that we look athletes to be collaborators. We want them to be solution seekers. That's what also need them to be. Without that, it's hard to play team sports in particular. And then lastly, we look to empower all of our students to thrive. All of these things are pillars within the MIA and their educational athletic philosophy as well. So those are the goals. Couple of years really has been marked by COVID. So we look at pre-COVID and post-COVID, and can we see an impact that we have sustained basically in the 2 years from when it started to where we are now, which I think is fantastic. I think you look at a lot of schools, that hasn't been the case. But generally speaking, from between 2 years ago and now, as you can see, our numbers are good. In addition to that, we've increased our athletic fees pretty significantly. And so we have not seen a reduction there as well, which for a school our size and a program our size, that's incredibly important. We need every athlete. Last 2 years, we've increased our programs. I would say the three most notable ones, we've added unified basketball, favorite sport that we have here. If you haven't had a chance to come see a unified game, I strongly recommend it. They participate in the fall. It's a wonderful experience for the athletes, for the able-bodied athletes, which we call our helpers, the coaches, the community. This past fall, we added esports. Really think of as part of the athletic program, but in talking with John and Marianne, we felt that here was a great home for it. So we had a pilot esports program. We had 15 athletes participate. Sam O'Neill here was one of our coaches. We had a fantastic fall experience with that, and we're looking to grow that in the spring, hopefully.
Can you tell us what is it?
What is esports?
Yes.
Esports is essentially competitive video games,
Got it.
for lack of a better term. We play it interscholastically like we do every other sport. It's actually run through the sister organization to the MIA, which is the MSAA. And so our kids compete online, of course, against other schools throughout the Commonwealth.
There's actually a video of us getting shellacked by.
Yeah,
Right?
Tewksbury, right? I think you prefer the one previous to that, but they were very good.
Not this past one.
So, and I will talk about esports again later on. The other significant in terms of numbers, because the numbers haven't been huge, but it is something that we've been able to offer that we never had, is a girls ice hockey co-op. We've had a boys ice hockey co-op for probably going on close to 10 years at this point. In 2019, we were able to add girls. And so we have 4 participants, but it's a group of athletes that we weren't able to hit before. And now we're able to provide them an opportunity, which is fantastic. Our teams necessarily, obviously, importance, but it is what people know. As I said, winning is what we teach. And 6 teams qualified for that as the top, which basically meant that they didn't have to play in as many schools did. Record and what we did was good enough to get us into that 32, which is inaugural season of the Central Mass Championship. 2 of our teams, both respective tournament. Our field hockey team also made it to the finals as well. They placed 3rd in their division, which got them an invite to the All-State meet, which has never been done before. And our fall cheerleading team won the Division II. So it was a tremendous fall for us, and fall has been at least in my time here, so we continued that this year. And lastly, student athletes out of 252 were recognized as either. So not only are we happy to see our teams do well out on the pitch, but also, and more importantly, our student athletes are generally doing well in the classroom as well. So one of the things we looked at, our money gone over the last couple of years, and has it paid off? And the answer is certainly in areas. You can see it, and it's to the crow's nest there in our gymnasium is what's called the Pixel camera. That is, it's a fully automated camera that can stream all of our events in the gymnasium. We adopted a program that was run through the National Federation of High School Sports, in which we're able to purchase this camera at a significantly reduced rate. Cameras such as this on the open market will run you about $8,000. We were able to enter into a program which, in the end of the day, cost us about $1,500. But it does allow us to live stream any activity that goes on in the gymnasium. Now, some of the activities do have a small cost to our viewers, but there are some benefits to that. They can view games for that same fee at other schools if they have the same system, which a lot of the schools surrounding us do. But as we hopefully return back to normal, and if we have events such as music, which we've typically had in the gymnasium, especially towards the end of the year, we are able to stream those for free for our music families that would be able to attend. Simon and I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but hopefully we'll get to do that next year. One of the reasons we did install this was because of COVID. Last year, we were unable to have fans in the gymnasium during our basketball, volleyball games, typically unified basketball. So this allowed families, the community, and extended to be able to view their student athletes play, which was a phenomenal thing for us to be able to add. you know, we have a couple other things, but I don't know if we've had a bigger return than in our unified basketball program. You know, they're masked, but if you could see the smiles on. This is a program in 2019. When we began, we had 12 total athletes participate. This year, in its past season, which finished up about a month ago, 28. Which, so we've seen phenomenal growth, and the kids genuinely love to be here and do it. And they compete in about 6 games over the course of the season against neighboring towns. This past fall, we competed against Grafton, Northbridge, Millbury, and then there's always an end of the year gather with some of the other unified basketball teams, and it's a great event for those kids. Once again, sports team, these 3 students that you see there, they, I think as Sean alluded to, they ended up making it to the semifinal of the state tournament in their first go in a game called Rocket League. I would defer all questions to Sam with regards to that, but the kids loved it, and I think what's great is you're talking about, of the 15 student athletes, 10 of which have never participated in a sport here at my high school for one reason or another. So once again, we're drawing athletes that we wouldn't normally draw, which anytime you expand, that's what you're looking to do. So we're hoping to advance that program, some additional titles. We only ran 1 title this fall because it was free and we were trying it out. We're looking to add, what, Super Smash Brothers? Yes, Sam? I think League of Legends. Those do come at a cost, so we will be talking about a small fee for our esports program come springtime. The other thing too is they typically play remotely, meaning they play from home. Ideally, and I think this is more of a long-term plan, we look at, can we house that here? And there's some logistical things that we would need to go through, specifically hardware that we would need to be able to have here. But there are programs out there that sponsor that I know Sam and I lastly is our athletic trainer. And at Megan is a phenomenal resource. In this day and age, every school needs a full-time athletic trainer. I cannot stress that enough. And when you see some of what we're looking at short-term, you'll see why that's at the top of the list. Megan is not full-time for us. Ideally, because of our stipend that we have, I can typically get her here in the fall and spring. And because those are the 2 seasons that have sports which mandate an athletic trainer be present. Typically hockey does in the winter, but we do not have an hockey team, so therefore Megan's unfortunately not here. What you see up there, so Megan collects, this is actually data from this past fall. Megan treated over 400 individual athletes this past fall, and treatment could frankly range from a Band-Aid to, unfortunately, in a couple of different cases, we did need an athlete transport. But thankfully, Megan was here for that. She tracks all of this data. She tracks what she, why she sees athletes, and she tracks who she sees. So that second is overwhelmingly the one most, and for good reason. You could certainly see that Megan interacts with all of our athletes and our friends, and all of our athletes and their families, excuse me. And she's a phenomenal resource, and one really, without her, we would be lost. And not having her in the winter does have a negative impact, I can be perfectly honest with you. We are unable to have that continuity of care that exists that we have in the fall and the spring. Some of our I too agree, as I guess you can see now, believe in professional development, not only for myself, but our athletes, our coaches. We've done a lot of this in-house. What you see here pictured is brought in all of our fall senior and junior athletes. See from here, she blends in left. She's actually in the MURSD, is a former student athlete of mine. She participated in the Olympics this past summer on the women's rugby team. So I tapped her to. She hates public speaking, but as she said, she's yet to turn me down. So I guess I'll keep going to that well. But it was a tremendous, as you see, our workshop. Townsend and Coach Della Rover each ran a workshop, and really we were able to do it for free, which is certainly a way to save money. Additionally, the MIA offered some fully subsidized programming for captains this fall. We took advantage of that as a league. We participate in the Dual Valley Conference, and about, I'm going to say 20 of our athletes attended a workshop at Whitensville Christian about a month and a half ago, give or take. Additionally, we were here. We were able to run them again this past summer. We ran volleyball and basketball. They do have a tendency to be the most lucrative. We brought in approximately $10,000, which we used to pay out for our strength and conditioning coach, Chris LeBlanc, who helps our teams specifically, more so in the off season, but also in the spring and the fall as well. Additionally, it's enough for stipend for this clinic and in lieu of materials for their programs, which we're in the process of ordering now. So get everything we want. Additionally, we have 15 coaches within the program who all volunteer time. They are not paid. They do it out of the love of coaching, the love of the sport, and ultimately the love of the kids, which, to have that is tremendous. It may sound which actually allows us to clean depending, it all depends on the amount that you send out, but about a $1,200 to $1,500 savings by doing that. I will say I've done a lot of laundry over the last end of the day, it's going to save us a considerable amount of money. And then just sportsmanship as well. Literally, as the attended a recognition ceremony by the local referee board for sportsmanship, and then our girls basketball team talked a lot about the for our students. We have over 22 different teams that our students can participate on. If you include esports, it's 23, which for a school opportunities our students have where they can play on teams outside of our school, like boys and girls. active members in terms of hiring of coaches. We've created a process in which those individuals who are finalists actually come and conduct a practice with our student athletes. I know Sean has but I think it's a real great way to get feedback, because at the end of the day, ones that are going to be working with these individuals on a daily basis. So I found it to be a great part of the hiring process. We do also have them on the initial committee. Student athletes also do have surveys at the end of their season in order to provide feedback to me about their season. We've created a Hall of Fame. Here at Nipmuc High School who have excelled, also to create connections, not only with it between the past and the present. We had our first inaugural ceremony about 6 weeks ago at this point, maybe a little bit more. That was 2 years. Also, the community attended. And I think over time, it will be a great way to connect, once again, not only the past and the present, but the community at large. Some of our weaknesses. Very volatile. We're banking on the number of athletes that we hope will come out. We've been lucky, and we haven't seen a decrease yet. But if that number were to decrease and we don't bring in the fees that we're expecting, that will have a negative impact. That can happen. It can be an incredibly difficult. Our facilities aren't exactly award-winning. Is what it is. We do the best that we can with what we've got, but we're becoming a part of the minority. 10 years ago, we were in the majority. Well, no longer, as you'll see. And the amount of money it takes to upkeep these facilities is a lot. And frankly, we can't do it. And we're doing it in some cases, in a subpar way. And that's no one's fault. It's just the reality. As you're going to see later, part of that short and long-term plan is what do we do about these facilities? Plan over time. We don't have that plan in place yet. I want to get it there, but we don't really have it at this time, which down the line will create that issue. We need to go as the for all our sports. I think giving back is. I do feel COVID has a lot to do with it. Not done a good job of over the last couple of years. I think we have in pockets, but as a whole, identity, and I think it's something that we need to bring to the forefront for all of our athletes to participate in. Organizations, we're generally talking about our youth groups throughout. That partnership has grown over the last 7 years, and I think it can continue to do so. I think we've developed fantastic rapport across. Talk about community service. You know, what are our athletes doing? How are they interacting with them? I think there's an area where you could see a lot of growth. Community. This is something that we've developed, but something that is popular now is local health organizations. Like, for instance, you look at Milford and their sports medicine program, partnering with schools and communities to provide, once again, that continuity of care for student athletes and their families. Something that we have a partnership with Milford, but it's something that can grow. Whether or not we were approached about looking into a team physician for our student athletes. Like anything, it comes at a cost, and I think it's an incredible resource. It wasn't something that we could necessarily do this fall, but I think it's something that we should seriously look at for the future. Because once again, student athletes will have that, frankly, over time, we're going to need to provide. Certainly, loss of student. We see our student athletes going, whether it be to Blackstone Valley Tech, whether it be to St. John's, St. Paul, other schools in the area. We lose athletes to those schools. At a point, we were losing 30% to Blackstone Valley Tech on a regular basis. That has a tremendous impact over time. It does ebb and flow a little bit, but it is going to impact us. As you can see, as a district, and over time also has an impact. At some point, you're going to offer less programs because you don't have kids to fill those seats, whether it be sub-varsity programs, whether it be sports as a whole. That will happen, and we certainly want to do our best to. I've seen decline, and by that I mean volunteers. We have people who volunteer to coach, which is phenomenal, that are helping out on the Gridiron Club or through the Warriors Club or simply on a Saturday at a football game. Those numbers have declined. Without those volunteers helping our organizations or helping the athletic department, we're going to have a hard time to be able to perform at the level that we've been used to. And last, Sam, is just the way schools in the area have athletic facilities, and you're going to see it. When you see where surrounding schools, what they're providing to their athletes versus what we are providing to our athletes, it's a big difference. And that will come back to impact. At some point, having a turf field was a luxury. No longer the case. Now, those with turf fields, they're looking at turf baseball, turf softball. Having the turf all-purpose field, it's commonplace. And we're behind in that. And that does come at a cost. And we have see these as short-term needs. The full-time athletic is at the top. What it would cost versus what we pay now, we pay about $15,000 over the course of the year. An additional $10,000 gets us that full-time trainer. We would work with Megan's organization, Precision Athletic. It would enable her to be here full-time. Additionally, we would be able to utilize what she does out on the fields. Every other year, it's no longer acceptable. Now, it has an impact on that floor, and it becomes a risk to our student athletes. It's something that we really need to resurface. I know Jay is working with. We really need to have a budget specifically for uniforms. And what that does is it allows us to get into a regular system of updating them. Right now, we put it in, it gets taken out of the budget, there we go. When I started, and I know you can click on this link to sort of the spreadsheet I have for our uniforms, you'll notice a green, yellow, and red designation. Green essentially means less than 5 years old. Yellow is about 5 to 7 years old. Red is anything over that. And the average life of a uniform, depending on the sport, depending on what it gets utilized, is about 5 years, 7, you're stretching it. You'll notice there's a lot of red, and that red has grown. It may not sound like a big, but the reality is, if you read, in the world of athletics, when they talk about successful programs, kids look at you, not necessarily to say that that's the right answer, but it is what it is. And there's data out there that shows when sure Sean can speak. Difference. It made a difference to those girls. You could see it. And that's not to say that we need to do this every year, but we need to make sure we are replenishing these on a somewhat regular basis. And they do get costly. $4,500 is basically enough to outfit one team. But as long as we're in the process of doing that, then we're setting ourselves up for success over time. Our cheerleaders issue, they're torn, they're beat down. They certainly predate me. And I can't honestly tell you, I'm gonna guess would be my guess with that. They're in some cases pretty gross, if I'm being honest. But more importantly, ourselves the resources to maintain that. We were, I guess, somewhat blessed with a lot of rain this fall. I don't know, asked me about 2 months ago, I might have disagreed with you, but our fields look good, but that's not how it always goes. And the one thing about grass is over time, it wears down. There's no question, as you're gonna see in a moment. This is something that, anything that we pretty much have in there has either been purchased secondhand or donated. We really haven't been able to fully devote to replace a lot of the things that are in there that frankly have just plain broken. On there today, and can probably attest to the number of broken items that we just haven't been able to replace because fortunately nothing's cheap. And that does. Soccer field right here. This is in front of the near goal. Not exactly a great place to play. This is our main field out by the street. That's what it looks like come November. Once again, our cheerleading mats I talked about, see that crease? That's not supposed to be there. That's a bad thing. Just another field out in the back. Once again, another picture of our front field, and then up you can see this is actually one of our weight benches that time to be replaced. And as you can see, some of our dumbbells, well, now have gone missing or broken or haven't been replaced. So facility upgrades are the majority of our athletic facility, certainly indoor, is original. You go to that gymnasium, the scoreboards that you see are from 1998. They're now to the point where they don't make the parts for it anymore. Everything is digital, everything is LED. We actually have light bulbs that on a yearly basis I have to have replaced or fixed. Guys come out to fix that, they always say, oh, you got another year out of it. We've had to stretch. So that's an issue. The outdoor planning to do over the next 5 years. I know we have some buildings coming off the taxes in the town. Well, what are we doing? What is the plan to help improve our facilities for our kids and our families? It's Cinder right now, which is an issue, Jay. We'll have to talk about that one. Anyway, that's, our kids. Bellingham, Northbridge, Grafton, Uxbridge. 4 schools with whom we compete against. 4 schools who could draw potentially our facility. What is the equivalent? We play the same sports. Like I said, we compete against that when we are up against, whether it be academically, athletically, we want to. This is going to have an impact. There's no question. And if a turf facility were to move in across the street at some point, that would be catastrophic. So I don't mean to play. We've always done that, and our community has done that. Right? We've athletes off to college. So we are performing, but questions?
Oh, tons of questions.
I just have one.
Sure.
On your budgetary needs, the yearly maintenance of fields, what is the actual number for that? 6 items all have numerical value except for that one. So that'd be the whole.
Most of that 20.
Like $50,000 to $60,000.
Truthfully, a facility like ours is probably 100. In all honesty, if you want to do it correctly.
Like if this is the presentation that's going on the website, that people are going to be looking at having an actual number in there, even if it's a range. Thank you.
So I just want to highlight a couple of the things you said, Chris, like for, uniforms have been a huge thing for me for a long time. I mean, when you have kids pinning the uniforms onto what they're already wearing so that they can wear a uniform, it's not a good uniform anymore. So, and there's a bunch of size problems that we have, as you know. We've got a lot of issues with something that seems so simple, but we don't have enough money for it, quite frankly.
No, it's true, and let's be honest, uniforms are only becoming more expensive.
Yeah.
I priced out, for instance, boys lacrosse uniforms the other day, in about $5,600 just for boys lacrosse alone, which traditionally are on the more expensive side. But I will tell you, we do need to look at football, and that's about $15,000. It's a reasonable. 7 years ago when they purchased it. You don't have to necessarily do it all at once, but those said we had.
So as far as the number of kids participating in sports, what is that as a percentage, of the total student population?
Between 40 and 50.
So yeah, I'm just looking into it. Is the numbers that we had here were like 246 for fall, 252 128 for winter, but it's hard to know what the overlap is. And
yeah, and you have, you athletes, because of first year we've really had relatively normal, last year would not have been at all. So, typically
rate, how has that changed over time?
it's actually stayed pretty stagnant. So it has not been impacted.
You're suggesting that we should use a debt exclusion to buy a turf field?
Well,
I think
if you brought, I think it's not just at the high school, but for youth organizations. We can raise money with it. The one thing is when you put a turf field in,
I think it's a misconception that a lot of people that I've talked to have out in the public. They saw the athletic fees go up by a lot, and a lot of people don't understand that's just to pay for the current way that we provide sports today. It's not for doing any increased sports. You're adding sports to the program, which may cost more in terms of transportation and things like that. But in general, we're trying to pay for what we have.
correct.
I've heard comments coming from people that say, I think they're on the slide trying to get a turf field. And I just wanted to set the record straight there. The difference in magnitude from the cost of a turf field and what we're trying to do to just support our existing programs is gigantic.
Well, it is. For us to be able to put a turf field here, and this is depending on how you did it, you're talking probably anywhere
I just want to, I looked at the schools here that you have as a reference, Bellingham, Northbridge, Grafton, and Oxford. So I just want to point out, Northbridge is quite a bit bigger town from us. They have a bigger tax base, and Bellingham is similar, because they have such a commercial district in Bellingham. Grafton, I don't know, maybe they're just rich. Are they rich? I have no idea.
No, that was part of the, so some of these come in with the building.
Okay.
So that was built when they built the new building.
All right.
So some of
So-
it is part of the package and others it's,
Part of
they
the
added in
inclusion,
just
they-
as
they
separate,
built-
yeah.
Sean,
Different
that's the
approach.
key.
And
It's part of the package.
Uxbridge is a real case in point, because they essentially had to get their school on the rocks in order to actually get the debt exclusion to get the turf field. So these schools went through gigantic hoops to get their turf fields.
Yeah, other than, but the others, yeah, certainly were part of.
I wouldn't say it's embarrassing, it's not, because we have very good teams that compete very well. But going to Hopkinton and watching the freaking kingdom of fields that they constructed up there is a joke. We can't afford a turf field to save our lives. So I just wanted to net that out, put a little perspective around it, because we have done a lot of discussion around this, and it is clear that it's an extremely expensive undertaking.
100%. And certainly, please don't think I would underplay that, because I wouldn't, you know. I think that it's a costly thing too. If you think about, you know, to do it properly, as we said, $80,000 to $100,000 a year. Do the math.
Ken and Jay to talk about facilities. And just a little background too, thanks Chris. Ask both departments and moving forward to really give kind of standard highlights, to really talk about the department, but also to talk about short-term budgetary needs that they'd be considering and proposing potentially, but also to really plant the seed for some of those long-term needs that we have, so we can start that long-term planning and strategizing too. So that's why we have the SWOT analysis to see that in the presentations. All right, hand it over.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. We're going to talk about the facilities department as a whole. Part of that is some of the stuff you just heard from Chris regarding the athletic fields. But we're just going to start with the very basics. So first of all, for those of you that don't know Ken Chouanier, who's sitting next to me here, he is our Director of Buildings and Grounds. He basically knows everything there is to know about these buildings. I mean, when I say everything, I mean everything. Like more than you would ever want to know. Ken comes and meets with me on a daily basis, gives me all kinds of details constantly. So I just want to stress that if there's something going on in this building, in any of the 4 buildings, he seems to always know what it is. As far as our staffing, we've got 6 custodians at Nipmuc and Misco, 3 at Clough, 4 at Memorial. We've got a couple of part-timers that kind of float around and fill in for people when they're out. You can see Brett and Doug are the 2 guys up in the top left. They are Memorial School guys. John is at Clough, Kevin Atkinson is here, Gary Engbloom is at Misco. These are the guys that basically deal with the day-to-day basis. So, you know, when we talk about, yes, we've got about 19, 20 guys in total that do this work, but think about Clough School as an example. We've got 3 custodians, 1 in the morning, 1 in the middle of the day, and 1 at night. That's a fairly big building for 3 guys to take care of. even a building like this where we have 6 guys here, when you think about it, this is a gigantic building for them to take care of the inside and the outside. So ideally, we could probably use more people, but this is the staff we have now, and these are the guys that make the buildings look the way they look. And although nothing is perfect anywhere, these are the guys that really make it all happen. Come in and see the shiny floor, see the clean room, see all those things, and these are the guys that are doing all the work. So I can't stress enough how important these guys are and what a good job they do.
Jay, are these the staff members responsible for doing all the extra cleaning and requirements for
Yes.
our code protocols too?
Yes, they have done absolutely everything. We did bring in a couple of part-timers last year, additional guys that work, part-time to kind of fill in and help out. But at the same time, you've got guys that are out on vacation, might be out sick, so generally our staff has not increased. So yes, these guys have done it all. They've gone above and beyond. I don't know how they're doing some of the stuff they're doing, but they really are the people that make the things happen. So I want to thank them a lot publicly, just so they know that we do appreciate what they do.
We do appreciate what they do.
Now, as far as how the schedule goes here, all the buildings open at 6 o'clock, and there's a guy that comes in every morning at 6 and kind of like turns the building on. The morning shift is 6 to 2, the middle shift or the night shift is either 2 to 10, 3 to 11. A lot of schools, and I'll use Clough as an example again, 6 to 2, another guy comes in like 10 to 6, so there is some overlap. Here, the same thing. Maybe somebody comes in at 2 o'clock and then other guys come in at 3 o'clock. It kind of staggers around. It really is based on what's going on in the building, especially this building in MISCO where there's always activities going on at night. And you guys have to imagine how much stuff goes on in these buildings. It's been less in the last couple of years with the whole COVID thing, but in general, both MISCO and Nipmuc have places all over the place where things happen. Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, cheerleading, youth basketball, outside, softball, baseball. There's just lots of activity in the building in all 4 schools. So that's the kind of the schedule that they do. And then of course we have weekend events as well. The guys have to come in and open the buildings up for a variety of reasons. So again, this is some of the stuff they do. So we kind of put together what we call a day in the life. So, what happens? So I'm gonna actually let Ken kind of give you a little bit about what happens when they come in the morning to sort of make sure that the building is ready for school.
All right, for instance, on Nisco Hill, when they come into the building, they come into the boiler room, make sure the boilers are on, the water pressure's up, hot water tanks are running, refrigerators are running, any leaks, any obvious signs of anything, compressors are running that run the whole building. Just kind of look around and observe everything in the building and make sure it's ready to open. Open up the building, get ready for the first people coming in, whether it's the daycare center, or the first teacher or students, and the bus unloading, and whatever they need to do. If they observe anything that's wrong, they bring it to someone's attention immediately so we can make sure the school opens on time.
So that there's a lot, and I can't emphasize how complex the systems are that run these schools. It's just not a matter of you come and turn a switch on and all the lights are on and great, everything's great. There are circulator pumps and 3-way valves and all these different things that make everything work. That he knows how they all work, but certainly I don't. But the guys that come in every morning have to make sure that all this stuff is up and running so the school's ready to open. Especially at Clough and MISCO where we have wells, you gotta make sure that the water pressure is up, that at Clough we have a potable water tank, that the tank is full, that something hasn't gone wrong overnight. It's fairly complex. So there's a checklist they go through every morning to make sure everything is working. Then as the day goes on, the day guys there's all kinds of work requests. I have a table that's got a wobbly leg. I need something moved over here. Somebody threw up in a classroom. I need furniture moved. The cafeteria has to be cleaned. My door doesn't lock. My door is locked and I can't get out. You name it. There's 1,000 things that go on every day that these guys deal with on a regular basis. They also handle shipping and receiving. And we get deliveries every day. They're responsible for bringing this stuff in and making sure it gets to the right place. So they kind of handle all that various stuff. Cafeteria duty is another one. I remember when I was in your seat on school committee, I asked the superintendent at the time, I don't understand, what do you mean cafeteria duty? His response was, cafeterias, they're disgusting. Would you want to clean those? They got to clean those every day. That's, part of the deal. The night guys come in and they basically clean the building, make sure everything's working, but they also sort of manage all the functions that are going on in the various buildings. They do repairs if repairs need to be done. Make sure that everything's closed and locked up. So again, there's a lot that goes into the day in the life of keeping these buildings open and running. So, what do we do to like prevent things from going wrong? And this is one of those things that Ken and I probably go back and forth a little bit on because I always wonder why, but then I find out why pretty quickly. So obviously we do inspections of our boilers and our fire alarms, the HVAC systems, the doors, make sure that the locks all work, all of that kind of stuff. The outdoor, equipment that we use, snow blowers, lawn mowers, everything that we have to use to do outside maintenance, that all has to be maintained on a regular basis. Again, Clough and Misco, where we have public water systems, we have to do water treatment every single month, or water testing every single month. There's fairly complex water systems, treatment systems that are in most schools. We've got to make sure that the leach fields and the sewer pumps are all working properly so that things go out. I think I mentioned this last time. I don't know if everybody knows, for example, at Misco, the leach field. So, anybody that lives in Mendon, you have a leach field in your house. The leach field at Misco is in left field of the baseball field. The tank is over by the parent drop-off. And everything has to go from there uphill to get to that field, which requires a whole pumping system. So those things all have to, there's an alarm back there that every now and then you'll pull in and you'll hear the alarm going off, and you have to go reset it, make sure everything's working. That's all stuff that we do on a regular basis. The HVAC systems, boilers, all that stuff is maintained on a regular basis, and we do inspections and preventative stuff to make sure that they work. Then when we talk about summer work really is when buildings are relatively empty. It gives us an opportunity to wash and wax all the floors, do some painting, repair anything that hasn't been working well. I don't know, what else do they do in the summer?
Strip, wax, shampoo the rugs, painting, repair lockers, any handrails, anything that needs yearly maintenance to spruce up in the buildings. All my custodians are the jack of all trades. Sometimes they're painters, plumbers, carpenters, mechanics, you name it. They do it. Whoever's good at it, that's what we have do it.
Yeah, everybody has a skill set, and we try to use that skill set to the best of its advantage in certain places. All right, so some of the things that we've done over the last few years, and it sometimes isn't as noticeable to know this, over the last, I'd say, 10 years, we've probably spent around $1.5 million upgrading the facilities in various fashions, not through debt exclusion, but through either operational funds or local sources, state grants, things like that. Both towns have utilized trust funds, CPC funds, specifically for those rubber surface playgrounds at Clough and Memorial. Some of the security camera stuff was done through some grants and some states. Some state grants and things like that we wrote. So those are some of the things we've done, but it is important to understand that making the facility good is what helps support the teaching and learning that goes on. The hardest thing, and I'm sure the teachers here will tell you, is when you're in a classroom and it's freezing cold or boiling hot, it's pretty hard to actually do what you're supposed to do, which is teaching and learning. So we try, and we're not perfect with that. We always have issues with various things, but we try to make sure that all those things are running the way they're supposed to run. So I don't know what happened to this, my slide here, it doesn't really matter. Some of the things that we've highlighted. So we've spent about $575,000. I don't know why that table's like that. The cents are on the bottom somewhat. We've spent around $575,000 each on both outdoor and indoor facility upgrades. So I know you just heard Chris talking about the athletic fields and how we really need to invest. We have spent a fair amount of money, it just hasn't specifically been the grass. When we say outdoor fields and grounds, I'm talking about, say, backstops at Misco, with some fencing around the parent drop-off line, some stairways going up to the fields, stairways on the loading dock, catch basins in the parking lots, some of the lights that had to be replaced.
So these are all expenditures over the last 10 years?
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. It adds up over time. And part of that as well are the rubber surface playgrounds that were done at both Clough and Memorial. So those weren't paid for by us, but those were still upgrades that we had to have done because those things had become dangerous. Inside, it's been things like water treatment, HVAC systems, unit ventilators. It's a variety of different things that we've had to do inside the building. We just recently put a hot water tank in this building. That was like $32,000 for a hot water tank. I mean, these things, it's not like your house. These are massive things. As you know, we're working on the boilers right now here. And that's going to be fairly expensive. So those are the kind of things. And then building security, we've done security cameras in all 4 buildings. So this was something we really were lacking up until about, probably just before COVID hit, I think is when we finished the last building. We really only had, I think NISCO had like 5 cameras. Nipmuc had a few more, but really not. And we now have full coverage pretty much everywhere. And we did that through a variety of ways. One, we used some operational funds. We did some grants through the state for 2 of the buildings. The town of Upton contributed from the trust fund they had to do memorial schools. So we now have, decent security camera coverage all the way around all 4 buildings, which is important because you need to know what's going on in the buildings. We did include some pictures here. That bottom right there is the new hot water tank that just went in about 2 weeks ago. That top left are the old boilers at Nipmuc. Those are going to be coming out. Those are about probably longer than this table from that end to this end. Big, huge steel things. I believe we're replacing them with much more compact, energy efficient systems. But those are some of the, I don't know if you've ever been in the boiler room. And again, Chris talked about giving you a tour. If you guys ever want to go on a tour of the facilities, Ken's the guy to take you. He'll take you up on the roof. You can go everywhere you want to go. I used to go every year with him. This is the first year I haven't. There's a lot to these buildings, and it gives you an opportunity to see what all of those are. Some of the things that we've done to help save money over the years, as you all know, several years ago, we upgraded the LEDs throughout all the buildings. So that was a program from National Grid that you did finance it over 5 years, so you did pay for it, but it immediately reduced our kilowatt usage by 25%. We are just this year finishing paying off those things, so we should see a drop in our electric bills next year because that charge will be coming off the books. The LEDs have been a great thing. I mean, we don't have to change ballasts anymore. The lights don't go out. I mean, on occasion, a bulb might have to be replaced, but it's been a great upgrade. It saves us a fair amount of money. We've also not invested any money, but taken advantage of solar net metering. So as you know, obviously we have carports at Nisco Hill, which are pretty easy to see. And those feed directly into the building and provide power to the building. We do have about a 3-month window from, I'd say, maybe March till like July, maybe 4 months, where we basically don't have an electric bill in Nisco Hill. I mean, we do pay for the solar production, but we don't get a bill from National Grid because we're producing enough to support ourselves. We have 2 off-site, 2 off-site ground sites. So I'd say about 95% of our electricity, I think I said 90 there, it depends on how much we use, comes from solar power at a greatly reduced rate. We save at least $100,000, probably more every year what we pay for electricity. The other thing that we do on an annual basis is we negotiate with the electric companies to get our electricity supply at a pretty reduced rate. We used to lock in our heating oil at a really good rate. I did not lock in this year because the price of oil when it was coming time to lock it in was ridiculously high, and I couldn't see locking ourselves in on the hope that maybe it will come down. But to give you an example, last year we paid $1.67 a gallon for diesel, which I think is a pretty good price considering what I pay at home. Natural gas, we're having the same issue right now. Our supply contract is up, and we're going back to the basic price because of the cost of natural gas. I mean, we were locked in at about 50 cents a therm. In our last contract right now, they're looking at 90 cents a therm. I'm not going to lock in at that high. We can pay that without being locked in. So we're hoping to get some better prices there. But those are some other things that we do. And then as far as purchasing, just in general, Ken has been really good about going to various suppliers and making sure that we're getting the best pricing. And if somebody gives us a price and it seems too high, we go around and we find other prices. We might go back to the first person and say, hey, look, I can get them from this guy for 20 cents less. You need to match it. And they usually do. So we're very, very aggressive in trying to negotiate pricing with a lot of things, not just maintenance stuff, but I think I told you before, I found buying textbook series and go buying a car. You just constantly negotiate the price and just say that's too much, and they go to the manager and talk about it. Just like buying a car, it's exactly the same. And eventually, the price comes down. So those are some of the things that we do on a regular basis. But some of the preventative maintenance also saves us in the long run because we're not having emergency calls where people come out and fix it because we've taken care of it. So again, we talked about a SWOT analysis. So the main strength to me, the biggest strength we have in the maintenance department is the staff themselves. And it starts with Ken and it goes to all the rest of the people who all work to make this all happen. Because without them, none of the rest of the stuff happens. I mean, they really are the biggest strength we have. another strike not listed here is we do, it may sound strange because we talk about a building that's 25 years old, but we have relatively new buildings with the exception of Missville Hill, compared to some districts. Other districts have newer buildings, but we are in pretty good shape as far as our facilities, as far as they're not like crumbling apart. But weaknesses. We have daily and weekly issues that need repair, and I've come to you several times to say, well, this is what's going on this week. I think at the last meeting, I talked about 4 or 5 major projects we're working on right now. Again, Ken comes into my office almost every day. I can't say he's there every single day, but he comes in all the time, and it's like, well, you want the good news or the bad news first? Well, this 3-way valve stopped working, and this check valve stopped working, and we have to do this. So there is a lot that goes into keeping everything running that we have to constantly deal with. And then we do have, on top of this, some things that are just aging out. Chris talked about the scoreboards that are 25 years old. Well, some of the other systems in this building are also 25 years old. One of them is the pneumatic system for the HVAC and computer management system that's in this building here. Eventually, we're going to have to upgrade that, and it's going to be fairly expensive. But those are some of the things that happen that, they're things that are just there. I'm going to go to threats next. I think, I always say, Misco Hill is our oldest building, and it is, of all the buildings, it has probably the biggest risk of having potential problems. We've done pretty well, and in some respects, some of the things at Misco Hill, because they're from the 60s, they were built really well. What I have found is that sometimes you buy something and 4 years later it doesn't work anymore, but the thing that's 60 years old works just great. That's just the way it is. But Misco Hill is in need of some more than just, waxing the floors type of thing, and that's something we're going to probably have to address at some point. So the opportunities, and Chris kind of touched on this a little bit. It is correct. We have the debt on Clough and Memorial and the green repair stuff, the roof and the boilers that we did at Misco Hill. All that comes off the book in FY24. I believe at that point it's going to be in the district's best interest to put together a capital bond that does a fairly major facility upgrade. Now, what does that really include? Outdoor fields and all that stuff is a very small part of that, but an important part. And on top of that, the roof at this building here is 25 years old and has leaks all over the place. The roof at Memorial and at Clough that are flat, those have leaks that we need to address. The shingles.
Do we still have that? We built that back in 2019, I believe. We built a capital.
We do have a capital list, which we'll bring forward at another time. That capital list is probably about $16 or $18 million, and it needs to be updated. Quite honestly, I have not looked at it. I did recently, but I haven't really addressed it since pre-pandemic because we've just had other things. Understood. But I do believe that that's going to be long range. That's something we need to look at, is a long-term capital bond to do a major improvement. And that would include potentially replacing the pneumatic system that's at both Misco and Clough, or at Misco and Mendon-Upton, with an electronic system. The computer management system in this building is also 25 years old or something close to that. Parts are not available. So, there is this fear that someday we're going to come in and it's just not going to be working. But we don't think that's going to happen, but these are things that we need to address. But the roofs, water treatment is going to be another thing that's coming up that we're going to have to deal with going down the road. So I think that long-range planning, that's what we have to look at, is are we going to come up with a capital bond? And I think we're going to need to spend probably the next 3 years putting that together. And that should include doing something with the athletic fields. Because I looked it up while Chris was finishing up. We have $30,000 at the NIPA budget for outdoor fields, and we dedicate 22 fields to grounds. We really should have double, triple that at least, because we should be doing a lot. And I can tell you as an example, I know BBT, and it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, they took their football field offline, I think for 2 years. They spent almost $300,000 just to reseed it and cultivate it and bring in some new loam and build it all up. That was just to get back to the dirt field that they now have again. We need to address that. The track at Misco Hill, Chris is right. There's more weeds and gravel in there. We have gone and done a whole raking out of the room, the whole thing. It just doesn't last that long, and it costs around $8,000 or $9,000 to do it. So that's why we tend to stay away from it or try not to do it all the time, because it seems like you spend all this money and 6 months later it looks like it did before you started. So again, long range, this is something that we're gonna have to look at. So, talking about FY '23, the proposed budget, after I just told you about all the things we need to spend money on, the proposed maintenance budget will probably be level funded with the exception of a couple of things. Heating oil, we're gonna have to increase that line item because I don't see the price of oil coming down super soon. Same thing with natural gas, and then we have the water treatment systems that we're still waiting for approval from DEP to put in. Hopefully those are gonna go in this year, but they're gonna require weekly and monthly maintenance to keep them running properly. If you remember when we put in the treatment at NISCO for manganese, we had to put a new leach field in the front. That's why we have that little mound down there. I call that. But I don't know what we're gonna have to do. I mean, that's one of the challenges is how do we treat the newest things that we've got, which is PFAS 6 that we're looking at. So these are all things that we're gonna have to look at. And then again, beyond that, there are the annual stuff that comes up and it's really unpredictable. One year it's the hot water tank at Mendon-Upton. Next year it could be some three-way valve on the boiler that goes to who knows where that's gonna cost $20,000 to fix, or the air conditioning unit at Memorial. A couple of years ago it was the air conditioning unit at in this building for the auditorium. All of these various things are going to have to get addressed, and those are the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Do you have any other things?
I think Phil was able to come in today, but he did take time and give us questions that we could ask you.
Good.
And one of them was about the water supply. If it's delivered by, it's delivered.
Are you talking about the bottled water?
No, the water supply at NISCO and Fluff.
So right now we are not allowed to use the water that comes out of the ground from the wells because it's tested above the state limits for PFAS 6, which is a brand new thing they just started testing for
So the
last year.
proposal is to have that tested for so that we can use the water out of the ground?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have to install a treatment system to remove the PFAS from the water. So right now, our water treatment operators have submitted a proposal to DEP. I believe it was submitted back probably in September or early October. They have not yet approved it, and it's new to them, DEP, as well as new to us. So they're still working on approving that plan, then we have to install it. It's gonna be a treatment system. You wanna explain it more? You probably know more about this than me.
And NISCO and Clef, they both have PFAS 6 in the water. We need to install 3 different vessels with a silica sand and medium or a resin to take the PFAS 6 out of the water, and then it'll be potable after it comes out. They don't know how we're gonna exhaust the byproduct that comes out of the tanks. We don't know if we're gonna have to send it out to be incinerated. You can't dump it back into the ground. They haven't decided on how we have to do it or how long it's gonna last before the resin becomes exhausted in these tanks. So there's gonna be 3 at Nisco Hill and I believe 2 at the Clef School.
If you remember several years ago, probably about 15 years ago, we tested high at Clef for perchlorate, which was very rare because perchlorate supposedly is a byproduct of fireworks, and I don't believe they ever really shot fireworks off in Clef. Maybe they did back in 1910, I don't know. But again, we had these perchlorate tanks. We used to have to buy 4 a year. It was about $15,000 for the 4 tanks, and then they swapped them in and out. We always had a couple as a backup so we could swap them around. So the plan is to get this system in place, and then we can then use the water that comes out of the ground again. Right now, we can't use it for drinking or cooking, so we're using bottled water, 5-gallon bottles like, I don't know if there's one around here. We buy it from WB Mason because they're the best price. The difficulty we've been having this fall is that WB Mason, if you only order 10 bottles, they can send it out in the regular delivery. If you order a pallet, which is what we like to do, because it makes it easier for us, they have to get a special truck with a lift gate, and they don't have truck drivers, and there's supply shortages, so it's like a myriad of little problems. So we've gone to ordering 10 bottles every single day. Because it's easier to do that than order 40 one day and then wait 3 weeks to get it. Because if you order 10, you get them tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think his question is really related to thinking that it's the town or public water supply. I think he was mistaking that to be a town water supply.
Correct. So we have 2 different systems. In Upton, we have town water at Memorial and at Mendon-Upton. So they're responsible for dealing with all this problems, and I don't really know where that goes. They have a whole water supply system here. In Clough and Misco, we have what's called a public water supply, but it's a well, just like what you have at your house.
Yep.
But because it's considered a public water supply, which I believe is more than, what is it, 10 or 12 people during the day or something like
Serving
that?
more water, when you're serving water to more than so many people a day, you become a PWSID, public water service, and you have to follow the state guidelines for all the sampling and testing and everything, which is more stringent than our neighbors across the street.
So, and that's it, you know, that's the challenge when you don't have town water. There is no town, the only place there's town water in Mendon is over on Route 140, there's a little bit to get people, doesn't help Clough at all. If we could somehow get town water in some fashion to both of those buildings, that would help, but it wouldn't change the fact that somebody has to be the water supplier and deal with whatever comes out of the ground and how they do it, because the water all comes from the same place, even if you have town. General Mendon has good water, I think my house has good water. I don't know about your folks from this one.
Yeah, I probably got the same problem as Misco had.
Yeah. Anyway, but that, yeah, so that's the water treatment stuff. Now, long-term staffing needs, I mentioned this in the beginning. We need to do two things on a staffing level. One, and I'm gonna start at the bottom, is we probably need a couple more custodians or maybe maintenance guys or a combination thereof, even if it means that they're floaters that don't necessarily work in one building, but, you know, all of them, they're under contract, they're year-round employees, they get, you know, vacation time, sometimes they're sick. You need to have coverage. You think, for example, again, I'll go back to Clough, because that's the easiest example. We've got 3 guys that work in their building. If one guy's on vacation and one guy calls out sick, you only got 1 guy left. So now you've got to get guys from another building, which leaves that building short. So we really probably need to add at least 2 or 3 more custodians at some point in the near future. We're not proposing that for next year, but I think it's something we need to think about. The second piece is Ken really needs somebody else besides him that actually knows how everything works. For a while there, you know, we've had a couple of people that we've tried to train to learn some of this stuff, but it's really complex. And quite honestly, if Ken doesn't have the answer and nobody else is here to do it, you know, Ken does go on vacation once every 7 years, and when he does, somebody has to be able to run stuff, because guaranteed, if he's out for a day, and this happened to him just recently, he, you know, decides, you know what, I'm gonna take a day off because I take a day off. Something goes wrong, the power goes out in a building, whatever it is, and he's getting called anyway because he's the only one who knows how a lot of this stuff works. So I think that's another position that we probably have to look at again. It will not be in the proposed budget for next year, but it's something we need to start to think about as we go forward. Other than that, that about sums it up. Do you want to add anything else to this?
You did pretty good,
Have I
Ken.
covered it all? I've learned from you, Ken. I've learned. He thinks I don't listen to him when he comes and tells me all this stuff, but I actually do pay attention to all of it. I just don't always like it. Any questions? All right. If there aren't any,
I just think the two things we talked about, the facilities list, I'm sorry, the capital projects list that we talked about like years ago, we're gonna need to talk that, we could revisit that.
yeah, I agree. That's something that's on my list. I have it out again. I need to update it because some of the things that were capital needs, we've already corrected at this point. So I need to move stuff around and kind of reassess it. And we probably have to refine some of the numbers as well.
We also, back then, we were talking about what is our biggest risk. Well, you probably already had a couple of those fall in your lap, so.
Well, you know, so if you remember in the past, Dr. Mariuszczyk used to always say that, you know, the saying goes that we're like one flush away from closing on this stuff, right? I don't know if it's really quite that bad. The leach field actually seems to work relatively well. But, you know, in leach fields, if they work properly, they shouldn't require a lot of maintenance. But again, because of the location of it, because we all know that nothing really perks around Misco Hill, eventually that's going to have to get addressed. You know, there are solutions, you know, that you can do that cost money, but there are short-term solutions to get around that. But yeah, that is one of the things. And again, these are all things that we need to look at capital list.
It's a whole new meaning to catching a really smelly fly ball.
Yes, it does. I never knew, I always thought that the leach field was in the football. Yeah, that was my understanding. We just, maybe Ken already knew this, because I think he was in school when they were putting it in.
Left field where the fence is?
It's all the way out, yeah, left field of the baseball field. So you go all the way up through those gates, and then it's out there. And supposedly there are some metal caps in the ground that are cleanouts. I've never been able to find them. I don't think Ken has found them, but they're out there somewhere. And Rich Carlson, who just retired from working here, but had been here about 25 or 30 years, he remembers like some of the stuff when he was at Nitmark, when that was Nitmark. This building didn't exist. But it is the leach field that was put in probably when the building was built in the 60s.
Got to get a metal detector and go find it.
Science, the leach field.
Perfect.
You know what, that could be a civics project for Brendan's class, or maybe a science project for somebody, you know.
I think they increased the leach field.
I can think of a catchy name for it as well, but I'm not gonna say it here. All right, thank you very much. If you have any questions about anything, you know, you guys know where to find me.
Thank you.
So I think we're on to school committee, subcommittee updates, and we're half an hour over Maureen's timetable here, so folks are gonna have to talk fast.
Good. On to the budget.
All right.
Budget's on the docket. So, yes, so we had a budget committee, I think it was 2 weeks ago today, right? And I'm just gonna read exactly what Maureen's got here in the notes. It was regarding the grant funding amounts and what we spend out of grants and what money is applied to grants. We went over what the revolving accounts do and how we manage the revolving accounts within the budgeting, and any of the initial estimates for the coming year. We went over all of that and how to present it and what we're going to do to try to communicate that in a more effective way. So I think we're gaining some traction here. I know I just went over a sheet with Eric today. I think we're making progress there. Do you agree? And we've also got to do a couple of changes to make it a little bit more legible. We reduce it down to a shorter format and start managing our expectations for that, and hopefully predicting into the future for some major expenditures. So we're trying to get our act together about making sure the budget's more communicated. And that's it.
Nice.
Okay.
It's pretty quick for you, Sean. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. I think that was a compliment.
Yes. Okay, questions? Okay, policy subcommittee.
I don't be loud, but I can talk fast. So we met at 6 prior to this meeting. We reviewed 4 policies and approved them with some minor changes just to update language on contacts. There were 4 policies: AC non-discrimination, ACA non-discrimination on the basis of sex, ACG discrimination complaint procedure, and JFAB homeless students enrollment rights and services. So you all link the background notes. So those were minor changes. So we just would need to vote to approve those as a full committee here.
Did we already go through the reading?
So you have them. So they were literally we just made some really minor update to clarify like who you would contact. So for example, in policy ACA, we just added it mentions that the Title IX compliance officer. So we literally just added a line to make it clear who the district Title IX compliance officer is, assistant superintendent of school. So like that's literally the only change. Same thing for JFABT. We're just designating that the district liaison for homeless students is the director of student support services. So the language of the policy doesn't change. It's just adding that clarification.
Okay. Are we required to waive one school committee meeting?
You can waive it if it's
Okay.
minor. You can have a motion to waive it and go directly to the second reading of that.
Okay. I'll make a motion to waive it and go to the second reading.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
So now a motion to approve all of these policy changes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we have 4 policies that were updated and approved.
And then we had two other policies that we looked at. We reviewed some more substantial changes to our policy ACAB, which is sexual harassment. So we kind of broadened the scope of that to include harassment in general. So we were going to hold that for a second reading at the next meeting. We also discussed a new policy, FFA, on commemorations. John and Marianne were present to share some of the work that they've been doing around establishing protocols for support staff around responding to the death of a student or a faculty member. So we will also hold that for a second reading at our next meeting. And that's it for policy.
And superintendent search.
That's also me. And this will be quicker, so I can say that our screening committee has met twice. We've done preliminary screening candidates, and our goal is to announce candidates for consideration by the school committee. I want to thank the members of the committee for their hard work and giving so much of their time, especially this super busy time of year.
Any questions? Thanks, Vicky. Okay, and moving on to new business, we have a MISCO school improvement plan. So, like, it's man up, so
Bring in some friends.
yeah.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to share our action plan with you this evening. And we'll be short and sweet. Hopefully you'll have some questions at the end for us. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce the members of our school advisory council who are integral in helping us craft this plan, and in the past have always been important collaborators in terms of implementing the action steps towards our goals. Some familiar faces here. Mrs. Manser's been with us on our school advisory council since I started. This is my 5th year at MISCO. And I'll let you get their names. And I just want to point out that Mr. Rosenau is here wearing several hats this evening. Mr. Rosenau is working on his administrative licensure, and this is a great experience in terms of that process. He was also assistant principal while Mr. Cuomo was on paternity leave while he baby Tessa to the family. And I assured Mr. Rosenau when he agreed to join us that you are a really supportive group and you'd be kind and you good sense of humor. So he's here. So we're grateful to have him. He's going to kick off our presentation.
Thank you guys for allowing me to be here. So when we talk about our school improvement plan, I think it's a good idea just quickly to look back to see kind of where we started. About 5 years ago when we started this work, we really tried to look at things through a lens of equity and inclusion. And so that first year, we kind of looked at taking Google Classroom, which is where we post all our students' assignments, and making sure we were doing that across the school and doing that with fidelity. We established professional learning groups where we would be able to get together and analyze student data, talk about creation of lessons and content that really met the needs of all of our students. And we also eliminated tracking at the 7th and the 8th grade level. In year 2, we started really examining data, and we went through various data cycles to make sure that we were really meeting those student needs and providing the proper interventions we need to make it equitable for everybody. We created a scheduling committee where we redid our schedule. One of the highlights of that was we created a rotating schedule, which again allowed for more access for more students, more opportunities. And we also began our PBIS work that year. PBIS is Positive Behavior Intervention and Support System. So we rolled that out towards the end of year 2.
And that brings us to year 3. And there's a lot going on this slide, and there was a lot going on in 2019 2020. We started that year with some great momentum from the works done 2 years previously. Our department chairs tend to dig in and learn it as a team, and then we take the show on the road and implement. So we were starting to implement the data inquiry process with our teaching teams. Really seeing some progress in terms of having our first meeting. We always look at big data. We say big data drives big questions. So we had looked at our MCAS data. create exploratory questions from that, and we're then in the process triangulating that data with classroom assessment information, benchmark assessment information to really figure out what we're going to provide in terms of intervention for students. We also were looking at the portrait of our learner competencies, and at MISCO we started looking through the lens of agency and voice. Felt like that was a good fit for the middle school level, looking at how to embed that into our curriculum instruction. And we had implemented a bridge program with mentorship from right to tier 3 needs of our students in terms of mental health and social emotional wellness. And then in November, I fell off a ladder and incurred a head injury and was not able to continue to lead that learning for quite some time. When I ultimately came back to school, I came for 1 week and then we went to a shutdown. And then we all really were kind of thrown into the mode of being first-year educators. And we know that when we're new to anything, there's this J-curve effect. So we came in anticipating it was going to be short-term. We knew we'd pull together and see our students through, and then quickly came to realize this is going to be much longer term than we imagined. It wasn't just our students that we were needing to pull through, it was each other. And it got to a point where we felt like we're in a bit of survival mode, figuring out instructional practices, how to sustain relationships with students when you're on the X and Zoom and Google Classroom. So there was a period of disillusionment where we got a little burnt out in trying to manage everything that was going on in our own homes and with our students, with their families and friends. But then we really started to get the sense that, hey, we're doing this, we're making it happen. We are keeping track of our students. We know who's participating, who's not. We have plans in place. Students are learning. So there was a sense of rejuvenation as we realized we're all educators, we're all learners, and this is just a continuation of that in a very, very different structure than we had ever envisioned. By June, we were able to reflect and talk about all the great things we had learned instructionally because of the pandemic that we intended to carry forward. And by the end of the school year, we were back to feeling anticipation about coming back to school unmasked and not socially distanced.
So as we came back to that school year, so starting this year, we were able to really take a lot of those lessons that we learned through the pandemic and really kind of apply them now and hopefully see the fruition of a lot of those. So in terms of our equity and diversity, we had taken a look at how we deliver our special education services and making sure we're actually doing that in an equitable way and that we're doing that in an inclusive way. We're re-rolling out our PBIS program as well as re-establishing our handbook committee. We started this a few years ago. We'll bring that back on, looking at that again through this lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion, make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our learners. In terms of data, we've started using things like iReady, Panorama, which assesses social emotional learning, just to get a really good idea of the whole student. We'll take all that data and we use with our professional learning groups across our teams and across curriculum, and it's just helping us provide better education, better lessons, assess our students better, to just make them better learners here at MISCO. We're also looking at our physical space within the building, making sure that's culturally proficient and representative of all of our learners. And we are also looking to have our teachers that have been trained in project-based learning become trained to be trainers in project-based learning so that they can forward that to other teachers within our school.
And so what Jen and Brendan have shared with you, where we're coming from and where we currently are, and we took that information and meeting with the school advisory council. We have crafted 4 goals to help us pave our work ahead, to help foster a culture and climate for all learners to thrive. We use these driving questions, sticking with this driving motif. And these are the 4 essential questions that we have also in our PLCs. What do we want students to learn? How do we know that they have learned it? And what are we going to do to support their learning, both from remediation and for enrichment? And so we use these 4 driving questions as we're crafting our goals. Our first goal focuses on what do we want all students to know about social emotional learning, and what are those SEL skills that we want all of our learners to embody. The action steps that we will be taking will be collecting and analyzing a variety of data, such as AMOS, which is an interface with PowerSchool that allows us to triangulate a bunch of data that allows us to give us a full picture of our students, panorama data, Thrively data, and other available data to establish a baseline and determine what our areas of growth are for social emotional skills. Our next steps would be to implement different supports such as SEL lessons through Thrively, engaging student voice by improving our school culture with the Student Advisory Council, revising our RTI program, and also just creating a climate by revising our handbook and developing alternative practices to support all learners, especially with the discipline and support process. And then we're going to use our interventions and progress monitor to make sure that all students are being supported here.
Goal number 2 on paper looks very much like goal number 1, but this goal has an academic focus versus the social emotional focus of goal 1. Our intent with this goal is to really accelerate the learning and the content and skills of the MAST frameworks. We are fortunate to now have lots of resources so that we can collect data on our own student performance. We think it's really important to establish a baseline so that we can measure progress. So we now have, in addition to classroom assessments, we have iWriting, we have Thriving, we have Panorama, we have all these tools and resources that we can use to figure out where kids are so that we truly know that what we're doing is working and impacting learning. AMOS is fantastic because it provides attendance data, office referrals, health office visits, in addition to grades that are 70 or below, missing assignments, things like that. So that creates a nice platform for our conversations with our teaching teams and counseling teams in the building. So some of our action steps are to work with our newly founded Student Advisory Council members to talk about our curriculum and to see if they feel it's appropriately challenging. We are also looking at reimagining our project block to be a win block, a what I need time period, giving students agency in how they spend that time and having their choices based on evidence of learning and feedback. We are fortunate to have the addition of a school adjustment counselor and intervention specialist. So with her support, we are working to revamp our response to intervention process to more closely align with the MTSS blueprint. So that work is actually in progress now, and she will be able to support. We've learned it's really important to support teachers through implementation of interventions as much as students. So having that staff member on board will allow us to consistently enable teachers to provide the interventions that students need. And we're focusing on interventions of students who need enrichment or extension, or students who need remediation, or students who are anywhere in between, so make sure everybody grows. And we'll gauge our success there with surveys from all stakeholders.
Our third goal really revolves around collaboration and communication, both with the community and with our students' families. I think one of the lessons and one of the, I guess, so-called positive lessons out of the pandemic was it allowed us to really look at how we communicate with our families. Communication is vital during the pandemic. And I think we really got a chance, teachers, administrators, and students, how important communication is. So taking those lessons, being able to reflect and assess the way we communicated, we really streamlined how we use Google Classroom, which is the way we push out our work to our students. So that students, whether they're 5th or 8th grades, have a similar experience. And kind of once they learn Google Classroom, they can carry that with them. We've looked at how we use PowerSchool, which is a way to give information to families about how students are progressing academically. Talking about coming up with consistent protocols about when teachers will enter grades and feedback into PowerSchool. And we're also, one of our action steps is to create these culturally proficient physical spaces and really look at what culturally proficient communication means so that we can meet the needs of our diverse learners. And as we know, our community is getting more and more diverse. We need to make sure we're communicating with all of those families and giving them the opportunity to engage with their students' education.
Goal 4 is where we are really able to continue our exploration of the portion of our learner competencies. And we feel at NISCO, if the PLL competencies are the roof of our school, then project-based learning is the foundation. Project-based learning really allows us to engage students in exploring the essential questions and enduring understandings of the frameworks and units of study. We feel project-based learning offers opportunities for deeper inquiry, authentic purpose for the work, publication or support from authentic audiences. We feel like that is the pedagogy and instruction that will allow us to really get those competencies well. Some of the ways we will be approaching this are to make sure that students are explicitly aware of the competencies and the skills embedded within them by making them visually apparent throughout the building. Our inspired learning days, students will be explicitly aware of how those days align with those competencies. In terms of project-based learning, we are resubmitting our grant to PBL Works to have a core group of teachers become teacher trainers so that we can have a ripple effect at MISCO in terms of that instructional practice and hopefully beyond MISCO into the district. We'll look for ways to embed project-based learning in existing units of instruction as well as new units, and really looking for ways to weave the Inspired Innovation Center into this work as part of our goal of flexible use of time and space. We'd also like to create tools and systems for students to monitor their progress in the development of the skills and these competencies.
We're very excited about each of these 4 goals, but in the different details and the action plans under each goal, you could see incentives, and we know that it's going to be needing a collaborative effort to engage all stakeholders to do this heavy lifting and all this work. The good news is we have the infrastructure to take this journey already built. We have our department chairs, we have curriculum time built into our schedule, student team time at each grade level built into our schedule. We have strategic meeting times. Our counseling team, special ed, all have designated times within the school day for us to engage in this work. We have great organizations such as the PTO and youth that allow us to continue this heavy lifting. Also creating the Student Advisory Council that allows us to engage students and give us that data so that this way we are moving closer to our targets. And the ever so popular question that you hear from the back seat on any road trip, are we there yet? We understand in designing these goals by following those 4 steps of what are the learning goals, what do we want students to learn, and how do we know that students have learned it, and how do we support students to either reach that area or to continue to extend that learning. In each of these goals, we have built-in metrics that allow us to use that data to establish our baseline, to set goals, and to progress monitor. So we have systems identified in each of these 4 goals to just continue to validate and help us grow that much closer.
Well, that's it. We appreciate your time and attention and are hoping to anticipate any questions for us.
I love that idea of using the SWOT. I love that. My natural question is where do you see that there are any resistance, any threats, any problems that you foresee in achieving this plan?
We did an activity in our staff meeting recently because when we talked to staff this year, I think we came back from the pandemic different, and we've been trying to figure out, people are feeling where we were talking about it before this meeting, more where we expect them to feel in March, sort of the buildings of teaching phase where it's long. And it's this pervasive sense of feeling overwhelmed. So we've been working on what is the it that has us feeling so overwhelmed. And I think initially we thought the pandemic was going to be like a speed bump, and we come back and we'd be back in action and then roll, and we're not. It's not that way. Students have different needs, adults have different needs. We are engaging in different practices. So I think the hesitancy, everybody at MISCO wants what's best for kids. So it's never about not doing the work. We know the work is hard, the work is worth doing. I think it's around managing what's on our plates and making sure that we are equipping people to do this work that we're asking them to do. So we really like to engage teachers in building it and chunking this learning out for staff and not pushing things too fast. So we do a lot in terms of our activities. And we talk about PLC, professional learning community, because it has a very collaborative approach. We think collaboration is always based around something that requires lots of heads together. So I think we are just really being mindful of how much we're asking teachers to do, making sure that there's a through line through all of it. And if there isn't, we're taking it off the plate for now. We're being really honest about it. Doesn't feel good. Teachers were perfectionists, and we want to make sure we do the best we can all the time. Being really mindful of the fact that not overuse our reserves and really focus on what's important. We always talk about our 3 big rocks. So make sure everything goes back to our 3 big rocks, and if it doesn't, we'll take it away.
Have you guys seen much data from iReady yet?
We're getting ready to administer our winter benchmark in January when the kids return. So then we'll have some nice comparative data to the fall benchmark. And we have been working with Cheryl around the PD sessions. And we've been working as department chairs around planning our staff meetings, our strategic times, time's our greatest resource. How do we use it all to meet these goals? So there's a nice timeline, I think, for what happens in our January staff meeting around this work we're going to blueprint. And then in our February, we'll be doing deep dives into this data piece, continuing this process of inquiry, making sure that we're all data literate in whatever our content area is. So I think that there'll be a nice line there for that winter benchmark data. That's going to be the perfect time to bring it to the table and everybody take it. Our elective teachers on the PD day are looking at Thrively data in terms of strengths-based approaches to instruction. So that'll be, I think, we're trying to make sure that it's all inclusive and that everybody has a piece in this, because we really believe we all want to do it.
You have a part in here for the drop of disillusionment. I love it because we use that all the time for adopting new technology. That's what we use.
The J curve.
Yes. So when in your curve, I think you're implying that by July you should have the kids back performing exactly the same way they were before COVID. That's what you're implying.
Guaranteed, Sean. 100%. Every kid.
That's goal number 5.
That's right.
All right, good.
And I should mark that in the minutes.
No adult left behind.
One question for you. In the beginning, you mentioned a few years ago, we did away with tracking, right? We came with kind of new methodology. And I know, unfortunately, COVID hit in the middle of it. But have data that shows that it's the right approach, the wrong approach, or if there's been any impact one way or the other with that change?
Right now, data shows no impact. If you look at the data that we have, which is not great at this point. So in terms of looking at MCAS data, we actually see a little bit of an increase in performance in terms of proficiency. And if you look at when tracking was implemented at MISCO, you can see a trajectory of decrease. So it's interesting in that regard, but we always say MCAS is great data. So we're really curious. Before iReady, we had Scholastic Math Inventory and Scholastic Reading Inventory as an SRI, but the people who were trained in how to use it were no longer around to really help us use it. So we really have these 2 scores. We use them, but they didn't tell us a whole lot. So the beauty of iReady is there's so much depth to the data. So it breaks it down into where the individual child is proficient, where they're not in terms of the frameworks. It really identifies very specific skills. So that tool has been instrumental in terms of crafting interventions around reading, math. The reading piece extends into science and social studies. So on our PD day, for the iReady work that we're doing, our social studies teachers will join our ELA and math teachers, because we don't know exactly what that would be. And then we are looking at the assessments that we give to students in class. And somebody taught me the question at one point, does it really? So does this assessment give us the data that we need, the evidence of learning that we need? Does it really? Are we really able to use this assessment data that we need to progress monitoring, practice, prevention, and instruction? So I think I was, year 3, for me as an administrator, I feel like your first 3 years under your belt, and the school becomes like yours and you really feel the fruits of your labors come to fruition. And I feel like we're just hitting that sweet spot, and then things shifted dramatically in lots of ways.
18 months to see.
But I feel that we are getting back to it quicker than I had hoped. So I
Which
feel like
MCAS scores are you referring to? Are you referring to the 8th grade MCAS for 2019 or 2020?
I looked at the previous 4 years
Yep.
from 2009, when we got the 2018 scores, and some analysis followed 2019, just to look back and see. And we're not where we should be in MCAS scores wise.
Oh, you saw an increase from the 2018 to 2019?
No, if you look at that 5-year span
I see.
from when the tracking was implemented to 2019, it's not a dramatic shift, but there's a little bit of a shift. Enough that made me curious to see, like, I wonder what this is all about. A lot of people are anti-MCAS. I feel like we don't hold ourselves accountable to what we don't measure. They're assessing our instruction in terms of the frameworks, and we're looking for, is it a learning gap or a teaching gap? So that's good data, it's helpful, but I feel like we're going to be much more equipped with what we have now, and we have different skills now to use that data than we have in the past.
So we've talked a little bit, I think, about some things that are measurable and observable, sort of the learning goal or your second goal. Can you offer an example that's something a little bit more concrete from maybe like the social emotional learning goal or the communication goal that you all have that we could look to and say, okay, they've made progress on some of these benchmarks?
Absolutely. I think in terms of conflict resolution, that's a good example. Ways to resolve conflict. We know that conflict is normal, it's healthy. So we talk about how to engage in that in a way that is productive. I think right now we're seeing conflict resolution that's much more physical than we're used to. We're seeing a lot more profanity than we used to. So we keep laughing and saying, it's like they've been home on their iPads with their siblings for 2 years. Because it is, they've all come back sort of presenting this way. When you think about the gap, if you're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 2 years is a big chunk of your life. It's a big chunk of your development. So I think that's an area where very concretely we could show reduction in physical aggression and physical response to conflict.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sure. Right, so we need a motion to approve the school improvement plan.
Motion to approve the MISCO school improvement plan for 2021-2022.
Second. All in favor? Aye. School improvement plan. Thank you guys for your
Thank you all.
presentation. Appreciate your time.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for waiting for us.
Hopefully we're working with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So moving on to other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours. None. Moving to correspondence. None to present. Future agenda items. We'll have some more departmental budget presentations. And then NUEF presentation, January 10th. We need to overview the vision of youth, is that how we're saying that? And highlight fundraising efforts and grant awards from the last few years. And unless anybody has anything else that we need to address, we'll roll call to executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exemption number 2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel.
John Nicholson, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Dorothy Scalia.
Carrie Lyons, aye. And we are adjourned.